I would say fine, almost fine, almost finable, almost finable.
I'm so glad to see you today. Really, it's an honor to have you here. I'm so thankful also that. Okay,
Thanks a
so
lot.
as you know, I I like to ask a little bit about the human behind the academic that you are, and a little bit about your childhood environment. So I start the questions always with, where were you born and where did you grow up?
Okay. Well, it is first time someone asked me to think about this, to speak about this. I born in a small village in the countryside, in inside the Po Valley, the Padana Valley. You know, in Italy there's a big valley. It's a very flat valley that cover from Venice to Torino. It is a very huge. Inside this valley, there's a lot of villages, a small towns, because this is a sort of sprawl city, sprawl town, very big sprawl town, covering a lot of this. Inside this assemblage of small cities, there's one in which I born some years ago.
Some years ago.
Some years
Okay.
ago.
Okay. Can understand that part. And do you think your childhood environment actually impacted the way you currently redirect your whole career of architecture to neuroscience applied in architecture? I mean, have you thought about that?
This is a strange question, I think, because from my point of view, because I never thought too much about this, honestly. But if I consider that I grew up in this small village, this village of 10,000 people, so it's a very small village in the countryside, and um, I maybe I can suppose, but I'm not sure, absolutely not sure, that the impact of the the features of the city,
Okay.
as we can, when we say the feature of a town, we refer to the scales of the building. Mm, Scale of the building, exactly because I grew up in a very low density aggregation, probably has been is one of the reasons for which I perceive the detachment between the jump between the condition in which you can live in a very comfortable way inside the very relaxing dimension against the condition in which you do not have this possibility, and you have to be doubly involved in a very fast, quick, and also in different situations. So the differences between these two conditions, uh, maybe implicitly without any level of awareness, could have impacted me. But it is only a strange hypothesis.
Well, we have to study that hypothesis of the unconscious, your unconscious level of mind while you are now, you redirect your whole career to neuroscience. But I believe, yeah, people view and evaluate other cultures from the perspective of their own culture and their childhood environment, because it's all you had in your brain.
But surely, my childhood in that environment surely affected me, modified producing a prime. But I'm not able to describe it anyway. This is very
But you
difficult.
miss it. You miss that environment at some point nowadays.
But no, I never lose my relationship with this environment, because even if I'm working in Milano and in now, my home not exactly where I born, but in another small town, a little bit bigger, but only a little bit, closer to the Organic Hills, where I have my home at the feet of the hills. And so I can find during the weekend a way to walk inside the woods and to breathe. So during the weekend, I need to retake my comfortable condition by I need to stay there during the weekend because it's the only way to which I can get my rebalance, after a stress condition that you continuously perceive in the biggest or bigger uh, towns in which you work. You fly, you run, you stay, you go. So I need to come back as at home in a comfortable condition. This is my surely one of the needs I perceive. And I'm very lucky because I have this condition. So I can understand people living in the towns where you have not this condition. And we have to build, we have to organize, to set up conditions favorable to permit people to breathe. The breath is a is a physiological mechanism, but is also a metaphorical condition that both are important. The metaphorical condition, but also the physiological one. And so this is my the point of view that I would like to stress a little bit.
Yeah, so basically you still go there, you recalibrate your senses when you go there, and then you come back to the chaos. And I mean, thank you for answering those questions. I know they are not common for you, but they mean a lot for me. Okay, so and I believe most of the people I had interviewed from neuroscience applied in architecture, they have one thing in common that I had investigated. They mostly all had a house in the countryside when they grew up. So this is one thing I had investigated. So now to jump to the real questions. Okay. So as an architect, what are some of the questions you would like neuroscience to answer that will help you design better buildings?
This is, for me, a simple question because I thought a lot about this before starting to investigate architecture through neuroscience. I was speaking also about this question this morning in another interview. Lucan has been a great architect, and Lucan investigated till the end, at the end, particularly at the end of his life, his career, investigate how the form of an architecture affects the experience people develop inside the space. So in other terms, why should we design school as the schools and hospital as the hospitals and the assembly room as all the assembly rooms? Why? Which is the formal differences? Which is the essence of these differences? Are these differences related to functional terms? I think no, not only. There's a difference related to the memory embedded in the form of the building. So I started investigating this point, and at certain stage, certain moment, I decided that neuroscience could be very useful to understand this. This is the reason for which I started thinking about neuroscience, because I was trying to understand which is the proper form for a space devoted to develop a particular experience. If I have to go to school, you have to learn. People have to live the learning experience because I like to stress experiences in this. I'd like to stress functions in experiential terms, in the phenomenological dimension. So when I speak about experience in first person, and I think which is the proper environment for that kind of experience? This is the question from which I start. Okay.
Did you got into any answers yet? Like, do you have any insight?
Yes, maybe I found some answers from my point of view, because the connection between the experience, if you read the experience in phenomenological terms, particularly in neurophenomenological terms, you can gain that there exists an overlapping, or better, an intertwining between the essence intended as the conceptual, metaphorical essence of the experience and the physiological dimension. The physiology of the experience, the physiology, it is the bodily feelings, this an emotion. It's not a basic emotion, but it is a bodily feeling, a sensation, a bodily sensation, through which you can recognize the different essences of phenomenological experience. For example, the learning experience about which we were speaking now. The learning experience is featured by the sensation of lightness.
Sensation
grow up of lightness. Because the grow up is a verb that can depict precisely the sensation that you seek. But the sensation is also the essence of the experience itself. So the sensation of lightness is a sensation that physiologically can be precisely described, because lightness is also a physiological sensation. Starting from the awareness that the conceptual thinking arises after the physiological understanding of our bodily sensation, because if you consider George Lakoff and Mark Johnson works about the metaphors, how the metaphors arise, from which word metaphors has been described and has been some way rise up by the how we can recognize the presence of, and how they arise. We can find the bodily condition, the bodily configuration, the bodily sensation as the proper source, the proper inception of this arising, of this resurfacing at the consciousness of this sensation, of the sensation themselves, as a concept. Because when we say, taking an example, I want to jump, to make a jump of quality, I want to dive in a new adventure, I want to hug an idea, we are using kinematics, sensory motor kinematics, as metaphor.
Right.
So from the bodily movement, from the kinematic dimension, we can draw out the core. The core are physiological sensation, interoceptive dimension, the sense of lightness, for example, the sense of warmth for the hug. Yeah, the sense of warmth is this physiological sensation belonging to the kinematic, the more extended kinematics. The sense of lightness from the jump, or the sense of freshness for the dive. So each one of the kinematics embeds a core physiological component. The core physiological component is the mir is the second part is specular. Specular. It is the mirror of a concept, an abstract concept that you can recognize as the essence of the experience. So coming back to the learning experience, if we recognize to grow up as the essence, to grow up as the sense of lightness are profoundly intertwined. And so we can find the connection between the experience, namely activities or function, as they in architects are used to say, the experience, its essence, and its proper physiological dimension. And from the physiological dimension to the movement. But movements are architectural systems because they integrate space. So you can describe movement, and you can, in the same time, describe also the space, able to be deformed, able to be transformed when the bodily movements develop. Because if you look precisely, you focus with attention to the bodily movement, you can recognize that the bodily movement is a system, a dynamic system of transformation of space. So you have one space able to welcome the jump, one space able to welcome and to suggest as a metaphorical affordance. This is one of the topics that I was mentioning in my book, because I published recently, last week, I published my book.
Congratulations.
Thanks a lot. In the book, I was describing the way through which, starting from the kinematics, the bodily kinematics, we can obtain different geometries, spatial geometry, as for example, Ernesto and Daniel Benekin described. So the bodily gestures, movement in the space can evoke as a metaphorical affordance different kind of movement. But making this, they are evoking specific affective dimension, specific different affective dimensions. Wow. This is one of the ways I think through which we can differentiate, we can recognize that a different configuration able to welcome different kind of experiences inside the architecture.
So, I think you just answered two of my questions, because another of the questions were like how architecture could so strongly affect the brain. And as I believe you were talking about this in Santiago de Compostela or Porto, about Rodolfo Ginás. And what you just said remind me of Rodolfo Ginás saying that how we internalize this outer reality, these images, it binds them together, like the morphology is an instrument, the structure is an instrument capable of making the internal reality. So we are making this internal reality thanks to the geometry.
The geometry of the natural, I started speaking about the natural environment because mainly I can say that I started to analyze the primordial natural environment thanks to the famous experiment developed by Falk and Belling about the savanna-like landscape more than 30 years ago, 40 years ago, recognizing as the acacia tree. The acacia tree is the perfect affordance, and this is the reason for which people, also in different cultures, in different parts of the world, prefer the savanna-like landscape against many other different landscapes, because simply the acacia tree is an affordance, is a mechanism of interaction between the human and the world, between the human and the space. Acacia tree is an architecture, is a natural architecture. Forgive me this kind of oxymoron, but it's a natural architecture because this is a special mechanism acting inside and with which we stratified in a long period this kind of very good relationship that this is the reason for which Falk and Belling discovered that many different cultures prefer this kind of scenario, this kind of landscape, because their gene has been featured, has been affected profoundly by this. This is a memory, bodily memory, that is in some way stored. It's been stored by many different, by the same brains, by different cultures. And one of the proofs capable to support this kind of interpretation is that the people in the different cultures growing up from children to adults started losing slightly this preference because the local culture overwritten gradually the natural preferences children were explaining, were supporting in the early years of life. So if it is true that the local cultures are able to overwrite the natural preferences, it means that anyway, at the beginning, everybody prefer this kind of landscape. If it is true, it is obvious, we have to explain this as the presence inside, the universally presence inside our brains of this kind of memory. This is something that is being moved from biographical memory to a human memory. It is stored inside our heritage, gene heritage. So I started from kind of consideration, asking myself, if this is true for the tree, why shouldn't it be true for the same for the cave, for the water, for the soil, for a trunk where people can rest? So there's other different, very simple, very primitive kinematics of the body that can be has been able to fix some pattern of interaction between the body and the environment, between the body, the natural environment in the first phase. After the erected phase, I think that after the erected phase, we started sedimenting, started layering gradually and slowly the preferences toward the natural environment. And after a certain point, we invented architecture. We invented architecture to fix, to create a steady context inside which to repeat the relationship, the social relation, because the social interaction began to be really crucial for humans, for the organism, for the Australopithecus, the new evolution, the evolution of the Australopithecus. So architecture came at a certain point as the way to refine these systems of interaction that humans started to develop within natural environment,
Wow, this is incredible how evolutionary psychology has a lot to do with our biology and the way we prefer to see the world and how we interact with this dynamic. I mean, you were talking about affordances, and I was thinking about Vittorio Gallese and you, and to ask you, I mean, is the mirror mechanism, or you think if is the mirror mechanism involved in the perception of affordances? Maybe?
Yes, absolutely. Sì, assolutamente, absolutely. It is one of the mechanisms. surely we can say that the neural mechanism is involved in many different interaction within the environment. Because we can observe an object as something out from my body, or we are within, because if we are wrapped by the environment, because we are inside a room, we are moving inside, we are navigating inside an object. This is not an object, it is a metaphorical affordance. But in the architectural room can provoke, can trigger a simulation in different ways. Because the neural mechanism can trigger the embodied simulation. But surely, as Alain Berthaud is continuously stressing, because I have a long debate with Alain Berthaud about this, but surely the simulation, the prediction, simulation about the prediction, also the simulation of the action that you can develop is in some way involve a larger part of the brain, well beyond the neural mechanism, because involve many other areas of the brain. It is a more complex mechanism. The simulation is a more complex mechanism of the neural mechanism per se. It is the neural mechanism, from my point of view, is surely the trigger. It's surely the trigger, but the application, the final outcome of this kind of trigger, this trigger, is involving a larger part of the brain, I think, involving many other parts, many cortexes, and also other parts of the brain, because also the affective dimension. So it is surely important. But anyway, the affordance are related to the neural mechanism, and also concluding, I think, affordance is a Gibsonian affordance. For Gibsonian affordance, I intend the glass that I have on the table, or the chair, or the object in my peripersonal space, but also out of my peripersonal dimension, also out of the peripersonal dimension, because another point that we have to continuously stress and underline is that the peripersonal space is the more effective zone by which the neural mechanism function works. But this is one of the remarks that frequently many persons raise up to the school of Parma, to the people that are supporting the neural mechanism important. They are saying, okay, out of the peripersonal space, how can the neural mechanism can be effective? In which way? Or are you sure that the neural mechanism is effective, works outside the peripersonal space? Well, we have to understand that the dimension of the peripersonal space is not fixed, it's not definitive, it's not steady, because we are moving bodies. And navigating inside the space, we are extending the peripersonal space continuously. There are many experiments. There's also the remapping of the peripersonal space is produced by the walk of people, by the navigation of people inside space. So there's not a definitive clear border of this peripersonal space. It is extendable, it is flexible. And so in this way, we can extend also the function of the neural mechanism to the space itself, to the architecture itself, not only to the object that we can grasp, we can take, we can sit on the chair, we can grasp, glass, we can grasp an object. This is not the only way to interpret the mirror mechanism, but it's the first level, the very, very, very trivial first level. It's not trivial, sorry, it is complex per se, also in this limited dimension, but is the first, only the first zoom so which we can work. The architecture works in the extra personal space, but the extra personal space is questioned by the peripersonal space when we move. Our peripersonal space expands continuously when we move inside space.
It just like I have a bunch of ideas, you know, I have difficulty talking when I have all these ideas that are arising while I hear you. So, I mean, I'm thinking about the coupling mechanism. I'm thinking about we are intertwined. I'm thinking about, okay, peripersonal space, extrapersonal space, atmospheres. So we are in one atmosphere and we can experience more than one atmosphere at once.
Well, atmosphere is another important topic.
Crazy concept.
Another very important topic. It is a really important for architecture, I think, because atmosphere is something that you grasp in a few milliseconds without the minimal awareness. It is the integration of many different factors, and personally, I think integration is the simultaneous integration of all the architectural features, all the architectural elements, the level of composition, and surely we can list among all these levels the topological dimension, the geometrical dimension, the scale of the object, the dynamical perception inside it. We can list also the rhythm that you perceive. You can list also the materials, colors, but also the light. The light is strongly important. I think the atmosphere is the light is one of the most important levels through which we can feature the architectural indoor space. There's also the smell, there's also the acoustic dimension. Also, acoustic dimension is strongly important to characterize the different atmospheres. So you can. I was writing a few minutes ago a small writing about the atmosphere, the Christmas atmosphere.
The what?
And the Christmas atmosphere. There's someone asking me to write something about the Christmas atmosphere. So, for example, for the Christmas atmosphere, the light, the feature of the light is absolutely crucial, essential, for many reasons. For example, in this case, for many reasons, I would say that the light. It is the most critical, the most fundamental. But in other atmospheres that can be organized for other experiences, rest on different and many and more complicated also level of the design. So the topological dimension, the dynamic perception, the scale of the space, because the distances between the boundary of the peripersonal space and the border of the room is really important, because naturally, even if you can extend peripersonal space, moving inside the space, if the borders are really strongly far from the peripersonal space, the relationship with the room change. So the scale of the design is, for this reason, is really essential. We have to think about it.
So you could say that, yes, we can experience more than one atmosphere in one single space while I move.
I don't think that we can experience many different atmospheres inside the same space if you don't change the ingredients. For example, you can, simply because I believe that when we are saying atmosphere, we are making reference to the emotional dimension, the affective dimension. And so if you if you design a space in order to produce and to evoke a particular kind of emotional dimension, if you want to change, if you want to shift from this dimension to another, you have to change something inside the space. You have to change, for example, you can change simply the light. Yeah. Changing the light, you change the emotional. You change drastically the visual perception of the space, so you can completely change the perception of space. You can perceive the same space in one way, in another way, from the morning, in the afternoon. In the morning, you have the blue light from east. In the afternoon, you have the yellow light from west. And you change completely the atmosphere inside the space. The space is the same geometry, same color, same material, same rhythm, same object, but you perceive completely differently the space, because only the light is changing, simply the light. But you can also change the atmosphere, also modifying the dimension, the position of the walls. When you are at theater, on the stage, on the theater, changing the scenario, the background, you change the atmosphere of the stage. You can represent an opera, or you can represent a theater piece. You can start from the opera, or when the classical Mozart, you can change the background, and you can represent Samuel Beckett. So you change the atmosphere, changing the background. So you can change also the feature of the space, so the plastic dimension, the scale, the color, the material. Well, you can change only the light. But anyway, it is the atmosphere that you produce is a sort of integration, a particular integration of all the factors that you have on the ground. You have on the table many different instruments that you can regulate precisely, and you obtain an emotional dimension. You obtain an atmospherical dimension. You can change the atmosphere, changing the organization, the regulations. You cannot have the same atmosphere in the same, exactly the same, using the same receipt you cannot have the same meal, a different meal using the same recipe. You have to change the recipe.
Yes, right. Yeah, I was thinking maybe perhaps I am here sitting in the living room and I look there, which is the kitchen, and I hate to cook. So it's a different atmosphere for me, certainly, just by looking there, just by my visual system and the retina and the thalamus and all the things that my brain is making while I just do this, So yeah.
Well, maybe I begin to understand. So maybe the perception, is a coupling between what we project outward with what we perceive in the space navigating. So if you project different sensation to the same environment, you perceive different kind of emotions. Because in the morning, if you are, or in one evening, you are very happy to cook, because this evening I want to cook because I'm very happy. I was dreaming to cook this meal for a person, and so you project on the kitchen. You project a very good awaiting expectations, and so you perceive the atmosphere in a very as now. Actually, I think I hate now to cook because I don't want to cook for me. I don't want to cook for that. So I don't want to cook. Stop. you project outward a different kind of expectation that is a negative expectation against the cooking action, the action to cook. So the atmosphere is perceived by you as completely different. This is true. This is true. I agree. I agree on this because expectation is the alpha of the perception. Expectation, what we project outward. It is a key, very important key that we have to focus on. Because the perception is composed by two different dimensions. One is the top-down projection, another one is the bottom-up perception. There's a continuous relationship between these two dimensions, the projection and the perception. The projection and the perception is a loop that we nourish continuously.
It's a never-ending cycle. Yes, you're right. And for example, I mean, if I ask you about, could you explain a bit about the humanistic approach to design, just to understand behavior? The humanistic approach to design.
A very easy question.
I know it's out of the. I just jumped because I have the questions. We can edit this on the interview. I will just.
Don't be. No, I'm not concerned about it. It's a very easy question because no, I'm joking actually because it is a.
I mean, can you explain?
My approach is based on the idea that there's not a sharp divide between the humanistic dimension and the scientific dimension. Why? Because as I was starting to describe at the beginning of this dialogue, if it is true that the abstract concept dimension, the conceptual dimension, the philosophical dimension arise from the physiological perception of our body, the consciousness, the mind, has been consolidated through the recognition of our whole bodily feelings in a social dimension, intersubjective dimension. I believe that the humanistic approach should be devoted to recover the essence of the experiences. As architect, I think that our main target should be to recover the bodily memories that along the evolution, along also the history of architecture, because also architecture is a technological tool that transforms our natural dimension. This is another, I could open a bracket, but this is not the moment, about the co-evolution, because co-evolution, cultural, natural, co-evolution dimension is the real evolution, because the evolution is not only Darwinian, it's a cultural Darwinian evolution, because of technology transformed humans, starting from the flint they refined to cut the skin of animals and prey. Starting from that very first artificial technological tool, the people's been transformed, and architecture has been a hugely important tool to transform the culture and the physiological dimension also. Well, there's not my target is to recover the essences of the experiences of people inside the architecture using neuroscience, because we can gain the emotional dimension and the conceptual dimension melted together, designing properly the space. This is the humanistic approach has been devoted to recover the if you want to say, simplifying a little bit much, but not too much, recovering the truth of the experiences.
Okay.
We forget the truth of our experiences, the essence, the essential dimension of experiences, because we overlapped during the evolution, the history, we overlapped it with many other different meanings. Something that shouldn't be erased, shouldn't be forget. But the cultural evolution produced also this kind of overlappings, frequently not so human-centered overlapping. You can make many. If you think about the experience to work, you can immediately intuit the field, the complex frame about which I'm speaking now. Because if you think to work as a creative, could be a creative dimension of humans, and now the work is began a completely different thing, and so the humans are alienated, and not in psychiatric terms. So we can say that the humans are deprived of the meanings of their own actions, simplifying. And so we can make this kind of extend this kind of reading not only to the work experience, but also to other many different kind of experiences people live in their life, their daily life also, and trying to understand if we can recover the true meaning of their experiences, and thanks to the architectural shapes, because they were saying the architectural typologies, the architectural different configuration hosts different memories, bodily memories, experiential memories of the essences of experiences. So this is a big challenge, but with super neuroscience we can make something in that direction. I think this is the reason very brief for which I started thinking to embrace neuroscience and environmental psychology to support this challenge, this kind of effort.
Okay, I think you are going to kill me right now, because while you were talking, I was thinking about another question that, you are talking about recovering the meaning of their experience, okay, with this configuration of architecture, okay, to give this to the end user. Do you think architecture will be able to be faster than virtual reality? If we talk about the metaverse, would maybe the metaverse have many things missing at this point to create a full atmosphere, but do you think the metaverse could be...
My facial expression betrays my opinion. I think I think metaverso and the virtual reality is a marvelous way to study the human response in the reality. You can use the virtual reality to study, as we are doing in lab, the way through which humans interact inside the real environment, because virtual reality is a very significant and effective method, tool to investigate the human perception. But we shouldn't produce the nightmare to substitute the reality with the metaverse, or with the virtuality, because for many reasons we need to, for one particular simple reason, we have a body. If the body is the source, is the inception of our mind, leaving the body outside the play, we are running a very big risk. So we can use the metaverse, we can use Facebook, we can use many things, different tools. We can use virtual reality, we can use social, but paying attention to maintain the relationship with this kind of tools, softwares, in the dimension that is not completely or dangerously capable to modify our humanity. Even if I was saying that we are human, naturally technological beings, as Vittorio Gallese has a different approach to this point, a slightly different approach. But I understand him because one of the most fascinating quote that I recovered many times is one of his quotes, is one of his phrases, typical phrases. It was said during a lesson that humans are naturally technological beings. Okay, because as was also stressing on my side, also the small flint that the first chapter started to use to cut the skins of the prey is also a technological tool. This small technological tools produces incredible transformation of the physiological dimension. But in some 100,000 years, the problem is the acceleration produced by technology, because we are transforming humans' dimension in so fastly that it is a risk, I think. You have to think that after the last time, I don't remember the name of the researchers, they studied the way through which children are capable, in childhood, are capable to recognize a different emotion reading the facial expressions recently. And they found that the children that are used to stay in front of not virtual reality, but using social media, use the screen, using the screen to communicate, have a lower degree to interpret, a low degree of capacity to interpret the facial expression recognizing emotion. So, emotion depicted on the muscles in the facial expression can be recognized with a greater effort by children, but with a greater effort and with a less precision. They do not discriminate so precisely the emotion depicted by the faces, because they are not used to involve their bodies in the relationship. Because when we explain, when we share an emotion, we do not share it only through facial expression, but also only using the hands, the body postures, all the signals that comes from the body as a whole. So it is a very interesting and dangerous signal, I think, that we can assume reading these papers. And it is not the only one. There's different papers suggesting this direction. So the metaverso and virtual reality, we should pay more attention. And so this is a big business, I know. This is a big business. This is also really convenient for many jobs. You can interact in a real, almost a real dimension with another person in another space in the other side of the world. But this is
yeah, I got you. You think we have to be careful with this, especially for our
I think we have to be very careful. Very careful.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm so happy you had answered all the questions already, and you've been as specific as you've been. I'm really thankful for this interview. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if you would like to say something to the audience that we have, to the architects, to the psychologists. We have a lot of psychologists watching these interviews. Would you like to say something?
But if you let me think a little few seconds.
Yeah.
Maybe I believe we have a big challenge. We have a big challenge because our city has been built as the way to promote social integration, pro-social behavior. But in the last decades, we transformed cities more in spaces inside which people perceive fear,
Okay.
perceive uncertainty, perceive negative feelings. The combination of this kind of feelings, the digital dimensions in which we are completely immersed, the climate disaster we're going to face, the mix of these factors, and the globalization of that is changing completely the economical, socio-economical dimension. All these features can produce, if we are not aware of this risk, a very tremendous outcome in the life of people. As architects, we have the tools because we have a double and a very complex background, because we are humanist in one direction, we are technician in other ones, we are scientists in other. We can use our knowledge to support the decision makers to save the planet, to save the town, to save our society. We have this chance because we have a knowledge capable to describe in a very precise way how can we transform cities. Cities are the place, but the place is really important for humans because the shift, the Neolithic revolution produced 9,000 years before Christ has been triggered by the architect. Very rarely we are aware that the architecture has been tremendously important for the cognitive jump. But if you look closely to Göbekli Tepe history, we can understand how the decision to stop and to fix their habits in a place, stress habits in a place, has been tremendously important for the cognitive jump. If we transform again cities and towns in not places but spaces unlivable, we are transforming profoundly our cognitive capacity. The cognitive capacity, the cognitive dimension, the affective dimension can affect the future of the next generation. So we have a very big responsibility and we have to be aware of it.
So basically you are saying this is a call from you to the architects, to the psychologists, to the doctors, to the neuroscientists to roll up your sleeves and start working towards better human-centered designs that will help us have better cognitive abilities and so on. Yeah?
Sure. I'm sure about this. I'm sure this is the moment. There's no other moment.
Wow, this is fantastic. I mean, I get so happy to hear this from you and to have some hope, because we have a lot of theory. But when you ask, okay, what's next? What we are going to do about it? There is not much answers. And at least to have the hope and to know that There's people like you already working on this. You are the director of the master in Italy, in Venice, about neuroscience in architecture. You are working constantly on these topics, yeah?
No, I'm working also in as the scientific responsible of the branch named Tuned beside Lombardini 22, the film in Milano, in which I'm speaking from Milano, which we are applying this kind of knowledge in airports, logistic platforms, houses, rest houses, schools, offices. So there's a way to solve the problem. There's a way. We have only to push for the shift.
Yes, thank you so much. And Davide, thank you so much for this interview. I will now let you go in peace.
Let's stay in touch.
Yes,
Ciao,
bye.
a presto. Ciao, a presto, ciao.
Presto.